The night sky over Manhattan glowed like a velvet curtain stitched with cold lights, but inside the luxury suite at the Plaza Hotel, the air felt heavy, almost guilty. Jason Carter blinked awake, head throbbing, the taste of champagne still clinging to his mouth. Beside him, half buried in the white sheets, Sienna Brooks breathed softly, her hair spilling across the pillows like a careless confession. Jason stretched, satisfied with himself, believing he had controlled every detail of his double life. He thought Emily, his pregnant wife, was at home resting, too gentle and trusting to ever doubt him. He thought the world bent to his story of success. Wall Street star, promising career, perfect marriage. Then he noticed something strange. His iPhone lay on the nightstand, but beside it, a small blue velvet box sat slightly open. Jason frowned. He never brought gifts here. He reached for it, still hazy, still arrogant enough to believe maybe Sienna had left him something sweet. But the moment he lifted the lid, the haze shattered. Inside, nestled in the velvet, were Emily's Tiffany diamond earrings, the same earrings he had given her on their anniversary, the ones she had worn proudly at every family dinner. Jason's throat tightened, his chest began to pound. He knew instantly Emily had been in this room. He grabbed the envelope next, his name written in her familiar script. His hands shook as he unfolded the letter. Emily's words were calm, deliberate, heartbreaking. She knew everything. She had followed the trail of hotel receipts and late-night lies, and she refused to beg for love from a man who threw it away so cheaply. She wrote that she was leaving not in fury, but in dignity, and that she would protect their unborn child more fiercely than he ever protected their marriage. Jason stumbled back, dropping onto the edge of the bed. His pulse hammered as if the walls were closing in. He imagined Emily standing in this exact room, her pregnant body trembling, her heart breaking in silence while he was tangled with another woman. Shame, panic, and disbelief tangled inside him. What had she seen? How long had she known? And where had she gone? Behind him, Sienna stirred, stretching lazily. She noticed the earrings first, then the letter in Jason's shaking hands. Her eyes widened with confusion and sudden fear. For the first time, the thrill of secret nights and champagne turned into something dark and real. Emily wasn't just a distant figure anymore. She had been here. She had looked at their betrayal with her own eyes. "Jason, what's going on?" Sienna whispered. He didn't answer. He couldn't. All he could hear was Emily's final sentence echoing in his mind. "I'm leaving. And you won't see me again until the truth comes to light." Jason lurched to his feet, heart clenching with the terrifying realization that he might have lost everything, his wife, his child, and the polished image he worshipped more than any person. He had believed he controlled the story, but Emily had just taken the pen out of his hands. And the worst part wasn't that she left. It was that she left without looking back. Outside, dawn crept over the city, but Jason felt only darkness tightening around him, a warning that the consequences of his choices were only beginning to rise from the shadows now. And Jason hadn't yet discovered the second letter she hid, one that would destroy far more than his marriage. 3 months before that night at the Plaza, Emily Carter believed her life in Manhattan was steady, warm, and safe. Every morning she stood by the tall windows of their Central Park apartment, pressing a gentle palm against her growing belly as she watched the yellow taxis scatter through the streets below. Her MacBook Air rested on the dining table, open to a set of interior design sketches she had been refining for a client on Fifth Avenue. Jason often kissed her cheek before leaving for his Wall Street office, telling her he was proud of her talent, proud of their future, proud of the family they were building together. Back then, Emily trusted Jason completely. He was busy, yes, but she believed ambition was simply part of the man she loved. He often brought home stories about demanding investors, unpredictable markets, and late meetings that stretched long into the night. Emily listened with patience, never questioning his schedule, certain that every sacrifice was shared. Whenever he texted that he might miss dinner, she reheated her soup, put away the plates, and assured herself that the long hours were temporary. She wanted their child to grow up in a stable world, one where success and security wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Still, even in that gentle routine, small cracks had begun to appear. Emily sometimes noticed Jason holding his phone a little tighter, angling the screen away when a message arrived. He brushed it off, teasing her for being curious, and she would laugh, convincing herself it was nothing. At a company cocktail event, she remembered seeing a young woman with striking red lipstick sienna leaning in a bit too close to Jason while discussing a PR campaign. Olivia, attending the event with a colleague, caught the exchange as well and later whispered that something felt off. Emily shrugged it away, clinging to the belief that her husband was loyal. During those quiet evenings alone, Emily would sit near the window, listening to the low hum of the city, wondering whether she was simply overthinking. Pregnancy had made her more sensitive, more emotional, and she feared that her insecurities might cloud her judgment. She tried to bury every uneasy feeling beneath nursery plans, baby clothes, and the soft lullabies she played while organizing the dresser drawers. Jason would come home late, the faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume clinging to his collar, and Emily forced herself to believe it came from crowded elevators or friendly hugs at networking events. She didn't know it yet, but her heart had already started to sense the storm assembling quietly behind her. One afternoon, while sorting through a pile of receipts Jason had left on the counter, Emily felt a strange tug in her chest. Most slips were harmless takeout meals, parking, office purchases, but one caught her eye. It was crumpled, faintly scented with the same perfume she had noticed. Printed at the top, "The Plaza Hotel, 2 glasses of champagne, late hour, no meeting description, no client notes." She stared at it, her breath shallow, her pulse trembling in her wrists. She told herself it must be a business gathering, something spontaneous, something she shouldn't worry about. But for the first time, her certainty wavered. She placed the receipt inside a drawer, hiding it as though the truth might burn her fingers. That night, when Jason texted he would be working late again, Emily sat alone at the dining table, her untouched dinner cooling, and wondered if her life was beginning to slip out of her hands. She felt fear growing inside her slowly. The first real crack appeared on a cold Thursday evening, when Manhattan's wind pushed against the windows of the Carter apartment like a warning whisper Emily didn't want to hear. She had spent the whole afternoon adjusting fabric samples and updating mood boards on her MacBook Air, trying to finish a design proposal before her next prenatal appointment. The baby kicked gently, almost as if asking her to slow down. She smiled, pressing a hand against her belly, unaware that the life she was trying to build so carefully was already beginning to shift beneath her feet. Jason texted at 6:12 p.m., claiming he had a surprise client dinner. Emily didn't question it. She warmed a bowl of soup, set 2 bowls out of habit, then put one away when she realized she'd be eating alone again. She turned on a small playlist of soft jazz to fill the silence, but the notes only reminded her that Jason usually whistled along when he came home late. Tonight, the apartment felt too quiet. When she reached to turn off the kitchen light, her fingers brushed against Jason's blazer hanging on the back of a chair. She picked it up to move it, and that was when the scent hit her. A woman's perfume, powdery, expensive, unmistakably intentional. Not the faint traces left from an office elevator. This one clung to the fabric as if someone had leaned in close, long enough for fragrance to settle. Emily stood still, her breath caught somewhere between confusion and denial. She pressed the blazer to her face again, hoping she was imagining it. She wasn't. She placed it back carefully, as if afraid any sudden movement would confirm her fear. For the next hour, she walked around the apartment doing small tasks, folding towels, watering plants, but her mind replayed the scent in relentless loops. She kept thinking maybe it belonged to someone from Jason's team, maybe someone hugged him out of gratitude or habit. New York was full of bold personalities, wasn't it? People who touched too easily. She tried to convince herself. She tried so hard, she didn't notice she had started trembling. Later that week, she found something worse. Jason had left his laptop bag in the hallway. When she bent down to move it, a printed receipt slid out. Another hotel bill. Same place. The Plaza. Same pair of champagne flutes. Late-night timestamp. No client name. No explanation. Her heart ached in a slow, heavy throb. She didn't want to be the kind of woman who checked her husband's things, but now every instinct in her body pulsed with warning. That night she called Olivia, asking if they could meet for coffee the next morning. At Starbucks in Brooklyn, Emily sat stirring her drink until it turned cold. Olivia noticed everything, the dark circles, the forced smile, the trembling hands. When Emily finally showed her the receipts, Olivia's expression shifted from concern to something sharper. She didn't accuse Jason, not yet, but her silence said more than words. Emily walked home after the meeting, clutching the coat around her as the wind stung her cheeks. She felt a quiet panic building, a fear she didn't want to name. She told herself she needed more proof before she allowed her heart to break. She told herself she needed to believe in her husband just a little longer. But deep inside, something whispered that the truth was coming whether she was ready or not. And soon, Emily would uncover the one detail Jason never expected her to find. Emily had never imagined she would become the kind of woman who studied her husband's digital footprints. But fear has a way of sharpening instincts. That Saturday evening, the city outside glowed with winter lights, and Jason left the apartment earlier than usual, claiming he needed to review numbers with a client before Monday. He kissed her forehead, told her to rest, told her to eat, told her everything except the truth. When the front door closed behind him, Emily stood still for a long moment, listening to the fading echo of his footsteps down the hallway. Something inside her, some quiet, wounded part, told her this night would push her forward in ways she didn't want but could no longer avoid. She moved slowly through the apartment, her breath unsteady. Jason had forgotten his iPad on the kitchen counter. Normally, she wouldn't have touched it. Normally, she wouldn't even have considered the thought. But tonight, the perfumed blazer, the hotel receipt, the late-night lies, they all swirled through her mind, turning doubt into necessity. Her heart pounded as she unlocked the device using their shared passcode, the one they had agreed on years ago when they trusted each other without hesitation. At first, she found nothing alarming. Stock charts, spreadsheets, calendar reminders. But then a notification slid across the screen, an email preview with a single, chilling line. Last night felt electric. I can't stop thinking about you. S. Emily froze. She tapped the email. It opened slowly, almost painfully. Inside, she found messages from weeks back, messages Jason had thought he'd deleted, but hadn't erased from the iPad's sync. Dates matched the hotel receipts she had saved. Words cut through her chest like slow-moving glass. Sienna's flirtatious notes. Jason's replies. Plans to meet. Compliments he hadn't given Emily in months. Whispered promises he should have only spoken to his wife. Her hands shook so violently, she had to set the device down. She pressed both palms to her belly, whispering an apology to her unborn child for the shock rattling her body. Tears blurred her vision, but for the first time since suspicion crept into her life, she felt clarity rising. She was not paranoid. She was not hormonal. She was not imagining anything. Jason was betraying her deliberately, repeatedly, confidently. Emily moved to the dining table, opened her MacBook Air, and began gathering evidence. Not to punish him, not yet, but to protect her child. She took photos, saved screenshots, created a folder labeled with a simple, trembling word. Truth. The more she uncovered, the more her heart fractured. She traced Jason's digital trail through emails, bank statements, calendar entries. She found charges at restaurants he'd never taken her to, receipts for champagne she'd never tasted, Uber rides starting near their apartment and ending blocks from the plaza. By the time she finished collecting everything, her body felt hollow, but her mind felt sharper than it ever had. She sent Olivia a message. I need to see you. It's happening. Olivia replied instantly, telling her to come by tomorrow morning, no matter the hour. Emily sat in the dim kitchen for a long time, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. She couldn't cry anymore. Not tonight. Tonight, the truth had finally spoken, and she had listened. And tomorrow, Emily would learn that Olivia recognized the pattern in Jason's betrayal for a reason he never expected. The decision came to her suddenly, the way a storm shifts direction without warning. Emily had spent the entire day replaying every email, every receipt, every lie tucked into Jason's soft voice. By sunset, a strange stillness settled over her, a calm that frightened her more than panic ever could. She no longer wanted explanations or excuses. She wanted the truth laid bare, stripped of charm and pretense. Around 7 p.m., while Manhattan buzzed with weekend energy, Jason texted that he would be working on a late strategy session. Emily stared at the message, not with heartbreak, but with a cold clarity. She picked up her coat, grabbed her purse, and added one thing she never thought she would carry into a confrontation: the Tiffany diamond earrings Jason had given her on their anniversary. They sparkled under the bedroom light, small witnesses to a marriage she once believed was unbreakable. She left the apartment before she could lose her resolve. A cab carried her down Fifth Avenue, past glittering storefronts, past couples holding hands, past the glowing windows of elegant restaurants where promises were made and broken every night. The city felt louder than usual, but inside the cab, Emily felt like she was drifting through silence. She touched her belly, whispering gently to the baby that she was doing this for both of them. When the cab stopped in front of the Plaza Hotel, her breath caught. She had seen the building 1,000 times, admired its elegance, its history, its golden glow, but tonight it felt different, like a living thing holding secrets behind its glass doors. She stepped out, the cold air slapping her cheeks, grounding her. She walked through the lobby, her heart pounding but her steps steady. The marble floor reflected the chandelier lights, and for a moment she felt painfully out of place among travelers pulling suitcases and couples dressed for weekend escapes. She hesitated at the front desk, but forced herself to speak. Her voice came out softer than she intended. "Hi. My husband might be here. I'm worried he's had too much to drink. Could you check if he checked into a room tonight?" The receptionist, seeing her pregnant belly and anxious expression, nodded sympathetically and typed quickly. "Yes, ma'am. Jason Carter. He's in suite 1914. Emily's stomach dropped. There it was, the truth in numbers. Not speculation, not fear, but fact. She thanked the receptionist and stepped back, gripping the earrings in her hand so tightly the metal pressed into her skin. But when she reached the elevators, she froze. Her body trembled. She imagined what waited behind that hotel door. Jason's voice, laughter, perfume, betrayal. She imagined confronting him, screaming, breaking down. She imagined collapsing on the floor, begging him to explain. And in that moment, she realized something frightening and freeing. She no longer wanted to be the woman who begged. She turned away from the elevator and headed toward the lobby restroom instead. There, beneath the warm lights, she pulled out the earrings and her small notebook. She wrote a letter, calm, steady, every word chosen with care. She wrote that she knew everything, that she saw the emails and receipts, that she had stood outside the suite door but decided her dignity mattered more than catching them in the act. She wrote that she was done, that she would leave quietly, that their child deserved honesty, and she would no longer suffer in silence. When she finished, she folded the letter and slipped it into an envelope. Then she returned to the front desk, handed both the earrings and the letter to the same receptionist, and said with a soft, heartbreaking calm, "Please place these in my husband's suite, on the nightstand." The receptionist nodded gently. Emily walked out into the cold night, inhaling deeply as she stepped onto the busy sidewalk. She didn't look back. Not once. She felt something break and something awaken at the same time. What Emily didn't know was that her letter would spark a chain reaction far bigger than betrayal alone. Emily didn't remember much about the cab ride after leaving the plaza. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red, and the noise outside slipped away until all she could hear was her own pulse, steady but aching. She held her coat tightly around her belly, whispering to the baby that everything would be okay, though she didn't entirely believe it yet. The letter she had left behind felt like both an ending and a lifeline, one she hoped she would never have to read again. When she arrived back at the apartment, she didn't turn on the lights. She moved quietly, almost instinctively, as if not waking the shadows would keep her pain from growing. She changed into comfortable clothes, folded a blanket, and packed only what she needed: a few maternity outfits, toiletries, prenatal vitamins, her MacBook Air, and the small ultrasound photo tucked carefully between notebook pages. She paused when she reached for her wedding ring, but left it on the dresser. She wanted her hands light free. Emily texted her Aunt Mary in Brooklyn, asking if she could stay for a few nights. The older woman responded within seconds, "Come anytime. The door is open." It made Emily cry for the first time that night, not because of Jason, but because someone cared without conditions. She wiped her tears, zipped her bag, and placed one hand over her belly again, grounding herself. Before she left, she walked through the apartment one final time. The nursery corner she had started decorating still held the little stuffed bear Jason had bought, but now she wondered if he bought it out of joy or guilt. The kitchen table still displayed swatches of fabric she planned to use for a redesign project, but everything felt colorless under the dim light. She looked toward the bedroom door, imagining Jason walking in smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. She refused to let that image define her life. Emily stepped into the hallway, locked the door gently behind her, and took the elevator down without looking back. Outside, the air was cold, sharp, almost cleansing. She tightened her scarf and caught a cab heading toward Brooklyn. Aunt Mary lived in a small brownstone on a quiet street, far from Manhattan's glittering noise. When Emily arrived, Mary hugged her tightly without asking questions. The warmth of that embrace almost broke Emily all over again. Mary led her inside, made tea, and let Emily settle into the guest room. It wasn't large, but it felt safe. Soft blankets, a small bookshelf, a warm lamp. For the first time that night, Emily felt her chest loosen. Hours passed. Emily lay awake listening to the distant rumble of the subway. Even in safety, doubt crept in. She wondered if she had overreacted, if she should have confronted Jason face to face, if she should have stayed for the sake of the baby. But when she remembered Sienna's emails, the perfume, the hotel bills, the lies, the regret vanished. She realized she hadn't left out of anger. She left because silence had become unbearable. Her phone buzzed once, twice, over and over, lighting up the dark room. Jason's name flashed repeatedly across the screen, but she didn't answer. The messages piled up. "Where are you? We need to talk. Please pick up." She turned the phone face down, letting the vibration fade into nothing. Then, around 3 a.m., she finally drifted into a fragile sleep only to wake to another message, this one colder, angrier. Running away isn't going to solve anything. Emily sat up, pulse tight. She realized Jason still believed he controlled the narrative. He still thought she would bend, forgive, return. But he didn't know the truth that settled inside her now, a truth that felt stronger than fear. She wasn't running away. She was stepping out, and she wasn't alone. Olivia had texted her earlier, promising they would meet first thing in the morning. Emily placed her hand over her stomach again. "I'm doing this for us," she whispered. What she didn't know was that Olivia carried a secret one that would expose Jason's betrayal in ways Emily never imagined. The morning sunlight struggled to cut through Brooklyn's gray winter clouds when Emily arrived at the small law office where Olivia worked. Her steps were slow, careful, one hand resting over her belly as if shielding the child from the cold and the truth she was about to reveal. Olivia opened the door before Emily even knocked, her face softening the moment she saw her. Without a word, she guided Emily inside, wrapped her in a hug, and led her to a corner office warmed by a small space heater and the faint aroma of coffee. "Sit," Olivia insisted gently. "You don't have to talk until you're ready." Emily tried to smile, but it felt too heavy. She opened her bag, pulled out her laptop, and began showing Olivia everything she had gathered. The receipts, the emails, the messages that still burned in her mind like open flames. Olivia read quietly, her expression shifting through anger, sympathy, then something else, something sharper, unexpected. "Olivia?" Emily whispered. "You look like you recognize something." Olivia closed the laptop slowly, as if deciding whether to reveal something she had buried long ago. She leaned back, exhaling deeply. "Emily, I need you to listen carefully. This is not the first time I've seen this pattern." Emily felt her pulse jump. "What do you mean?" Olivia hesitated, then finally spoke. "Years before you and I became close, I handled a divorce consultation for another woman. Same hotel, same excuses, same credit card trail. The husband was cheating while presenting himself as the perfect professional. His name was redacted in the file, but the pattern, the payments, The timing, it matches Jason. Emily stared at her, stunned. You think he's done this before? I don't think, Olivia said softly. I know. The world seemed to tilt. Emily felt breathless, as if the air had thinned. She had suspected betrayal, even expected lies, but she never imagined Jason had a history of repeating it. He hadn't simply made a mistake. He had perfected the art of deceiving women. Why didn't you tell me? Emily whispered. Because I didn't realize until last night, Olivia said. When you texted me from late at night, it felt familiar. Too familiar. So I checked my old files this morning. The transactions align almost exactly with Jason's early years at the firm. Emily's hands trembled. The betrayal she thought she understood now stretched deeper, older, and darker. Jason hadn't just betrayed her. He had practiced betrayal long before she ever entered his life. And there's more, Olivia added, pulling out a printed email. This came from someone you'd never expect. She placed the paper gently on the desk. It was an email from Sienna. Emily blinked. Why would she contact you? Olivia tapped the page. Because she's terrified. Jason used her name on a few transactions that look questionable. She thinks he might try to blame her if you take this to court. Emily felt her stomach twist. She imagined Jason calmly shifting blame to the next woman, the next distraction, the next person foolish enough to trust him. Sienna wants to trade information, Olivia continued. Proof, screenshots, messages that he didn't delete. She'll give us everything as long as her identity stays minimized in the paperwork. Emily swallowed hard. She felt no sympathy for Sienna, but she understood the fear. They had both been deceived by the same man, only from different angles. What do we do now? Emily asked quietly. Olivia leaned forward, determination sharpening her voice. We build your case. Not out of revenge, out of protection. You're carrying his child. You deserve financial stability, safety, and truth. And Emily, you're not alone. Not now, not ever. Emily took a long breath, letting Olivia's words settle. She wasn't the trembling woman who wrote a goodbye letter in a hotel restroom anymore. Something inside her had shifted. Jason wasn't the man she married. He wasn't who she thought he was. And for the first time, she realized she had the power to expose him. What Emily didn't know was that Sienna's evidence held a secret capable of shattering Jason's entire career. Emily sat in Olivia's office the following morning, feeling both exhausted and strangely steadier than she had felt in weeks. The truth was heavy, but it no longer crushed her. Olivia had already arranged a private meeting with Sienna, scheduled for later that afternoon. Emily tried to breathe slowly, telling herself she was ready, even though her heart still twitched at the thought of facing the woman who had unknowingly stepped into her marriage. She hadn't come to attack or accuse. She came to understand, to gather every piece of evidence, and finally end the life she no longer recognized. Sienna arrived at the small conference room looking nervous, wrapped in a long coat that did little to hide her tension. She sat across from Emily without makeup, without bravado, looking far younger than she appeared at the plaza. Her hands trembled when she opened her purse and pulled out a stack of printed screenshots. She admitted she had been scared for weeks, afraid Jason would abandon her, or even blame her if anything surfaced. Emily listened silently, surprised by the emptiness in Sienna's eyes. This woman wasn't a rival anymore. She was simply another casualty of Jason's selfishness today. Sienna leaned forward and revealed the detail Olivia had hinted about earlier. Jason had used her name on several questionable charges, including a few luxury hotel bills that didn't match his company's travel reports. Worse, he had once asked her to sign a receipt, pretending she was part of a marketing meeting. She confessed she hadn't understood the implications at the time, but now she feared he might pin financial misconduct on her if the truth unraveled publicly. Emily felt a cold anger rise, not toward Sienna, but toward the man who had manipulated everyone around him for convenience alone. Emily breathed deeply, collecting the documents with steady hands. Every new piece of evidence didn't just confirm the betrayal, it revealed the scope of Jason's dishonesty. This wasn't an affair born from weakness or confusion. It was calculated, patterned, and built on years of entitlement. Olivia guided Emily through the legal steps they would take next. Securing financial support during pregnancy, protecting her living situation and preparing to file for divorce with a strong case. Emily listened carefully, absorbing every instruction. She know 83 longer 84 felt 85 helpless 86. She felt equipped. She felt awake to the truth she had avoided until now. When the meeting ended, Emily stepped outside into the cold Brooklyn air, clutching the folder of evidence to her chest. For the first time, she felt a strange blend of heartbreak and empowerment. She walked slowly toward the subway, though she didn't plan to ride it, just needing movement to settle her thoughts. Cars rushed past, people hurried by, but Emily felt suspended between the life she was leaving and the uncertain one ahead. She thought of her baby, of the tiny heartbeat depending on her strength. She promised silently she would not let Jason's choices shape their future anymore. She returned to Aunt Mary's brownstone just after noon, settling again into the warm living room that already felt safer than her old apartment. Mary brought her tea and listened quietly as Emily explained the morning's revelations. There were no dramatic gasps, only steady, comforting support. Mary reminded her that courage often comes disguised as heartbreak. The baby kicked softly, as if agreeing. Emily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of everything but also the beginnings of strength rising inside her. Tomorrow she would take her first legal step forward with Olivia beside her, every careful moment toward justice ahead. What Emily didn't know was that Sienna's screenshots contained one message capable of collapsing Jason's entire Wall Street future. Olivia arrived at Aunt Mary's brownstone early the next morning, carrying her laptop and the folder Emily had filled with evidence. Emily sat curled on the couch, one hand resting on her belly, the other gripping a mug of warm tea. Her sleep had been broken, but her resolve had only sharpened. Today she would take the first official step toward ending her marriage. Olivia reminded her that the process would be emotionally heavy, but with the screenshots Sienna provided and the hotel trail Emily uncovered, they would walk into court stronger than Jason ever expected. They arrived at Olivia's office just after 9. The conference room was quiet, lit only by a soft lamp, making Emily feel safe enough to breathe deeply. Olivia opened her laptop, began organizing the evidence into a clear timeline, and explained which documents would establish Jason's pattern of dishonesty most convincingly. Emily listened carefully, nodding as she tried to steady her racing heartbeat. At one point, Olivia paused and gently touched her arm, reminding her that fear was normal but temporary. Emily felt grateful. She hadn't realized how badly she needed someone who cared enough to guide her. By mid-morning, Olivia had prepared the preliminary petition demanding temporary financial support, medical coverage during pregnancy, and exclusive residence rights for Emily until the divorce terms were settled. Emily felt a mixture of relief and grief, sensing the finality in each typed sentence. Then Olivia opened a separate folder titled Sienna Evidence. Emily watched as message after message appeared on the screen. Jason, promising weekends, promising trips, promising secrecy. But one message froze them both, an exchange where Jason asked Sienna to keep quiet about the company card. Olivia's eyes hardened instantly. This wasn't just infidelity. It was misconduct. Emily felt her stomach tighten as she realized the implications. Jason hadn't only lied to her, he had used company funds to support his affair. Olivia explained calmly that such behavior could trigger internal audits, disciplinary actions, even termination if the evidence reached the right hands. Emily felt a mixture of vindication and sorrow. She hadn't wanted revenge, but she also couldn't ignore the truth. Olivia assured her they would handle the evidence carefully, protecting Emily while allowing the facts to speak for themselves. Emily nodded, trying to balance justice with the emotional weight pressing against her chest. After filing the initial paperwork, Olivia insisted that Emily take a break before reviewing anything else. They walked several blocks to a small cafe, tucked between a bookstore and an old record shop. Emily held a warm cup of cocoa, grateful for something that didn't shake her hands. Olivia talked her through the next steps, securing housing rights, formalizing evidence, preparing for the possibility of negotiations. Emily listened, absorbing the information slowly. She was tired, but she felt something new, stirring a sense of control she hadn't felt in years. Even heartbreak couldn't erase the fact that she was finally choosing herself. That afternoon, As they returned to the office, Olivia's phone buzzed with an unexpected alert. She checked the screen, stopped walking, and her expression shifted sharply. Emily felt her heart tighten. Olivia turned the phone toward her, showing an email forwarded anonymously from a corporate address Emily didn't recognize. Attached was a confidential notice. The company's compliance team had flagged irregular charges on Jason's card and begun a preliminary review. Emily inhaled sharply, realizing the fallout was already reaching beyond their marriage. Jason wasn't just risking his home, he was risking his entire career. Emily felt the ground shift under her suddenly. And the first inquiry was only the beginning. Jason had always believed he could manage any crisis with charm, strategy, and a practiced smile. But when he arrived at his Wall Street office Monday morning, he sensed something was off before he even reached his desk. Conversations quieted as he walked by. A few coworkers avoided eye contact. His assistant looked nervous, glancing at a folder she clearly didn't want to hand him. When she finally did, Jason opened it and froze. A notice from the compliance department requesting clarification on several charges tied to his company card. Hotel stays, champagne receipts, restaurant tabs that did not match any approved meetings. All of them stamped with locations he had visited with Sienna. Panic crawled under his skin. He slid the folder shut and forced a steady breath. He convinced himself he could talk his way out of it just like he always had. He crafted a quick explanation. Client entertainment, misunderstandings, clerical errors. But the reality settled deeper. Someone inside his life had disrupted his carefully built facade, and he knew exactly who it was. Emily. He tried calling her again. No answer. He texted, "We need to talk," then followed with, "This is getting out of hand," then a longer message blaming her for involving strangers in their marriage. He deleted it before hitting send, pacing his office like a trapped animal. Every version of the truth he rehearsed felt weaker than the one she already had. By lunchtime, he decided to visit the Central Park apartment, hoping she had returned. When he stepped inside, the emptiness hit him harder than any accusation. Half her clothes gone, her toiletries missing, her shoes no longer by the door. He moved through the apartment like a man walking through a memory he could no longer touch. He saw the half-finished nursery, the folded baby blanket she had chosen, and realized her absence felt louder than her presence ever had. He sat on the edge of their bed, running his hands through his hair. For the first time in months, he felt fear, not fear of losing Emily, but fear of losing everything his image depended on. If the company discovered what he had done, if the board caught wind of his misuse of funds, if the partners learned the truth, he could lose not only his position but the future he had convinced himself he deserved. His phone buzzed. A message from his attorney. "We received a preliminary petition from Emily Carter's counsel. We need to meet immediately." Jason's heartbeat hammered. He grabbed his coat and rushed out, forcing confidence into each step, rehearsing excuses. But when he arrived at his attorney's office, the confidence dissolved. Olivia had submitted a sharp, undeniable request. Temporary financial support, exclusive residence rights, and documented evidence of misleading financial behavior. His attorney's expression was strained as he slid the papers across the desk. "Jason," he said carefully, "this is serious." Jason clenched his jaw. "She's overreacting. She's emotional. She's pregnant." "No," his attorney replied firmly. "She's prepared. She has evidence. And these flagged transactions, they put you in a very vulnerable position. You need to tread carefully." Jason felt heat rise in his chest. He had expected anger from Emily, maybe tears, but not strategy, not legal precision, not strength. For years he had told himself she was gentle, soft, safe. He never imagined she could become someone who challenged him head-on. He stood abruptly, ignoring his attorney's call to sit back down. He told himself he could still regain control. He convinced himself Emily was just scared, confused, unsure of what she wanted. He would talk to her. He would fix this. He always fixed things. But as he walked out of the office, his phone buzzed again, a message from his firm's compliance officer requesting an in-person meeting within 24 hours. The illusion of control slipped from his grasp. And Jason still had no idea that Emily's next move would strike at the very image he depended on to survive. Emily woke before sunrise in Aunt Mary's brownstone, her body heavy from another restless night. The baby shifted gently, as if sensing the weight she carried. She sat up slowly, breathing through the ache that had settled deep in her chest. Today wasn't about anger. Today was about survival, hers and her child's. She dressed, hugged Mary goodbye, and headed to Olivia's office to prepare for the next steps. In Manhattan, Jason was spiraling. After receiving the compliance request, he barely slept. His usually impeccable appearance looked frayed. Undone collar, tired eyes, forced calm. He sat at his dining table staring at the empty half of the closet, the quiet rooms, the untouched breakfast he tried and failed to eat. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a rising star. He felt like a man whose world was slipping through his fingers faster than he could close his fist. He kept checking his phone, waiting for Emily to reach out, expecting her to soften. She always softened. But today, the silence was absolute. And silence was something Jason didn't understand. He decided he couldn't wait any longer. He needed to find her. Not because he wanted reconciliation, he wanted control. He wanted answers. He wanted to steer the narrative back to where he was the hero of his own story. Meanwhile, at Olivia's office, Emily sat at the conference table reviewing documents for the upcoming temporary hearing. Olivia moved through the paperwork with steady confidence, her experience shaping every step. She explained how the petition would protect Emily's housing rights, guarantee support for medical bills, and secure a safety net before the deeper divorce proceedings began. Emily nodded, absorbing each detail, even as her stomach tightened with nerves. Halfway through the meeting, Olivia's assistant rushed in quietly. "Jason is downstairs," she whispered. "He's demanding to speak with Emily." Emily felt a cold shock run through her. Olivia's expression changed instantly, sharp, protective. "You'll stay right here," she said firmly. "He doesn't get unscheduled access to you anymore." But Jason wasn't someone who accepted barriers easily. Moments later, his voice echoed down the hallway, tense and desperate. "Emily, I know you're here. We need to talk. We can't do this through lawyers." Emily felt her pulse race. She had imagined seeing him again, but she never pictured him breaking into her safe space like this. Olivia stepped into the hall, blocking his view. "Jason, you need to leave. This is a legal office. Your behavior is inappropriate and could be used against you." Jason ignored her. He leaned to the side, catching a glimpse of Emily through the doorway. Their eyes met his, filled with fury and disbelief, hers with exhaustion and resolve. "Are you really doing this?" he asked, taking a step forward. "Running to lawyers, turning our marriage into some public performance?" Emily stood slowly. Her hands trembled, but she faced him. "I'm protecting myself," she said quietly. "And our child." Jason laughed bitterly. "Our child. You disappear without a word, leave some dramatic note, and now you want to act like the victim?" Emily felt her throat tighten, but Olivia stepped beside her. Jason's jaw clenched. "I made mistakes. People work through mistakes. But dragging my career into this? That's low, Emily." Emily's breath caught. "Your career is falling apart because of your own actions, not mine." Jason looked stunned, as if the world had tilted in a direction he couldn't control. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then took another step toward her, but Olivia blocked him with a firm hand. "Leave," Olivia said, "or I call security and document everything." Jason stared at Emily one last time. "You don't know what you're starting," he said quietly. "You're going to regret this." Emily felt a flicker of fear, but beneath it, something stronger stirred defiance, courage, a voice she didn't know she had until now. "I already regret staying," she replied. Jason froze. The words hit harder than anything he expected. For a moment, Emily saw the man he really was, small, frightened, angry that someone finally saw through him. He turned sharply, muttering under his breath, and walked out of the office. As the door slammed shut behind him, Emily sank into her chair. Olivia placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you know," she whispered. Emily nodded, taking a shaky breath. But neither of them knew that Jason had already decided his next move, and it would cross a line he had never crossed before. Jason stormed down the busy Manhattan sidewalk, his breath fogging in the winter air as he replayed Emily's words again and again. "I already regret staying." It echoed like a wound he couldn't control. He had expected tears, hesitation, maybe even forgiveness. But defiance, strength, a refusal to bend, that he had not prepared for, and it terrified him. He shoved his hands into his pockets, his mind racing. The compliance investigation, the disappearance of his wife, the petition demanding support. Everything was unraveling at once. He had to regain control before the board caught on, before the rumor mill started spinning, before Emily realized she held more power than she understood. He decided to try a different tactic. Not anger, not pressure, a softer approach, a tactic that had worked before. He would appeal to her emotions, make her believe he cared. He would draw her back in just long enough to negotiate terms quietly. The last thing he needed was a messy legal war or public humiliation. So he sent a message. "Emily, please. Just meet me once. For the baby. No lawyers. No fighting." He waited. Nothing came. He tried again. "You know I love you. I want our family." Still nothing. What he didn't know was that Emily was sitting safely in Aunt Mary's living room, her phone face down, refusing to even look at his messages. Olivia had reminded her earlier that emotional manipulation was Jason's strongest shield. Emily knew if she saw his words, if she heard his voice soften, if he pleaded with her the way he used to after arguments, she might crack. Not because she trusted him, because she remembered who he once pretended to be. So she turned the phone off completely. Jason, however, saw silence as an invitation to escalate. That evening, he showed up at Aunt Mary's brownstone, knocking loudly enough to make the old windows shake. Emily froze when she heard his voice through the door, low and urgent. "Emily, I know you're in there. Please. We need to talk like adults." Aunt Mary appeared behind her, jaw tightening. "Do you want me to answer?" Emily shook her head, her pulse quickening. "No. Please. Don't open it." Jason knocked again, harder this time. "Emily, you can't hide forever. Just let me in." Emily stepped back, holding her breath. Her throat tightened as fear curled around her ribs. But she wasn't alone, not anymore. Aunt Mary walked to the door, her voice firm. "Jason, she doesn't want to talk to you. You need to leave. Now." Jason forced a shaky laugh. "This is between me and my wife." "Not anymore," Mary replied. "You lost that privilege when you betrayed her." Jason's mask cracked for a split second. "You don't know what she's done. She's trying to ruin me." Olivia reminded her that the process would be emotionally heavy, but with the screenshots Sienna provided and the hotel trail Emily uncovered, they would walk into court stronger than Jason ever expected. Jason hesitated. He had never been spoken to like that, calmly, firmly, without fear. He stared at the closed door, breathing heavily, his control slipping. After a long moment, he muttered something under his breath and walked away, but Emily didn't feel relief. She felt the tremor of a man cornered. Later that night, Jason sat alone in his dim Manhattan apartment, scrolling through the petition Olivia filed. His anger simmered with something darker, desperation. He wasn't worried about losing Emily emotionally, she was already gone. He was terrified of losing his money, his image, his position, and he was beginning to realize she held the power to take all of it. He poured himself a drink, staring at his reflection in the window. "If she wants a fight," he whispered, "I'll give her one." What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was that Sienna had just sent Olivia a final batch of screenshots, including one message that tied Jason directly to misuse of client funds. A message no lawyer, no board, no judge could ignore. Emily didn't need to fight him. The truth was about to do it for her. And Jason was only hours away from learning just how deep his downfall would cut. While Jason paced his glossy Manhattan apartment like a trapped wolf, Sienna Brooks sat alone in her small studio, staring at her phone with trembling hands. The night felt colder than usual, even though the radiator hummed loudly in the corner. She had spent days pretending she was fine, posting curated photos, attending rooftop events, and telling herself Jason would choose her. But now the truth pressed against her like a weight she couldn't escape. Jason wasn't choosing anyone but himself, and she was beginning to understand just how dangerous that made him. Earlier that evening, she received a message from someone inside Jason's firm, a junior associate she once flirted with during a holiday event. The message contained rumors that compliance was digging deeper than expected. Names were being cross-referenced, transactions were being flagged. And one of those transactions included a late-night hotel receipt signed under her name. Something Jason had told her was just paperwork. For the first time, fear overcame whatever fantasy she had imagined about him. Her hands shook as she reread the associate's text. If this blows up, he's going to blame you. Protect yourself. She remembered the last conversation she had with Jason, the irritation in his voice, the way he snapped when she asked where things were going. She remembered how quickly his charm evaporated when he felt cornered. And she remembered the night he made her sign a receipt at the plaza, telling her it was just to streamline reporting. She hadn't thought twice about it then, blinded by the way he touched her waist, the promises he whispered. But now she understood. He hadn't been planning a future with her. He had been constructing an escape route, one where she would take the fall if necessary. Panic clawed up her throat. She grabbed her purse, pulled out the folder she had quietly compiled screenshots, call logs, photos, payment confirmations. She had never planned to use them. She had just felt something nagging inside her, a warning that Jason wasn't a man to trust blindly. Now those files were her only protection. She paced the room, trying to swallow her rising fear. She considered calling Jason, but the thought made her chest tighten. He was unpredictable now, cornered by consequences he never imagined would reach him. Approaching him meant risking, becoming a casualty of his desperation. So she texted Olivia instead. "There's more. I need to talk." An hour later, they met in a quiet corner of a Brooklyn cafe. Olivia arrived with a cautious but measured expression. Sienna sat hunched over the table, clutching her phone like a lifeline. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Sienna pushed her phone forward and whispered, "He's going to throw me under the bus. I know it, and I won't go down for something he orchestrated." Olivia examined the new screenshots, one that made her eyebrows lift sharply. It showed Jason instructing Sienna to categorize a hotel stay as a client entertainment expense, even though no client had been present. It also hinted at a larger pattern of misuse involving funds not meant for personal indulgences. This wasn't just infidelity, it was professional misconduct. "Do you understand what this means?" Olivia asked quietly. Sienna nodded, tears forming. "I didn't know he was using me like this. I thought he cared." Olivia softened. "You were manipulated, and now you're doing the right thing." Sienna wiped her eyes. "I just don't want him to destroy me to save himself." "He won't," Olivia assured, "because we're going to make sure the truth is documented, correctly and safely." For the first time in weeks, Sienna exhaled a shaky breath of relief. She handed over everything, emails, attachments, even a voice memo Jason had sent late one night complaining about bending rules to keep things quiet. Across the cafe, Emily watched from a distance, her breath catching at the sight of the woman who helped break her marriage. But when she saw the fear in Sienna's eyes, her anger softened into something unexpected understanding. They weren't enemies. They were two women who had lived through the same lie. They parted without bitterness, without confrontation. Sienna left quietly, pulling her coat tight around her, ready to rebuild the life she let Jason derail. And for the first time, Emily realized something profound. Jason wasn't just unraveling emotionally, his entire career was about to collapse under the weight of his own greed. Emily sat in Olivia's office again the next morning, feeling the weight of the evidence stacked on the table between them. The screenshots, receipts, and voice memos had grown into a thick folder that could ruin a career in seconds. She wasn't seeking revenge, but the truth had built momentum, and there was no stopping it now. Olivia explained that Jason's firm would launch a full compliance review soon, and they needed to be prepared for his next move. Emily listened without tears, without trembling. She was past the point of shock. She was settling into strength. Meanwhile, Jason was scrambling across Manhattan. His compliance interview was scheduled for the end of the week, and the tension inside the firm was already suffocating. He sensed whispers behind conference room glass, the cautious way partners looked at him, the subtle withdrawal of colleagues who once admired him. He tried to reassure himself that he could hide behind charm, but fear bled through the cracks. His career had always been built on flawless presentation, and now even a small rumor could destroy the image he valued more than anything. Then came the invitation he had forgotten about, the annual charity gala hosted at a luxury midtown hotel. It was a high-profile event attended by donors, executives, and board members. Jason usually shined there, using it as an opportunity to elevate his status. This year, he needed it even more. He convinced himself that showing up confident and polished would quiet any growing doubts about him. A perfect suit, a calm smile, a glass of champagne in hand, he believed he could still control perception. Across the river in Brooklyn, Olivia saw it differently. She believed the gala presented something else entirely, a stage where truth could be acknowledged without shouting. She suggested Emily attend, not to confront Jason publicly, but to exist in the same room with dignity, maturity, and undeniable presence. Emily hesitated at first. The thought of facing him under crystal chandeliers made her stomach twist. But Olivia explained gently, "You won't be there to cause a scene. You'll be there to remind him he doesn't get to define your story anymore." Aunt Mary agreed. "Standing tall is its own kind of justice," she said while brewing tea. "And you won't be alone." With their encouragement, Emily allowed herself to consider it. She imagined walking into that grand ballroom, not as a broken wife, but as a woman who had survived betrayal and rebuilt her strength. She imagined the calm of knowing the truth lived on her side. She imagined the silence Jason would feel when he realized she wasn't hiding, not from him, not from anyone. And slowly, she nodded. Preparations began quietly. Olivia arranged for a tailored, comfortable dress that flattered Emily's pregnancy while maintaining elegance. Not dramatic, not flashy, simply beautiful. Emily practiced breathing techniques her doctor recommended, ensuring she would feel steady even if emotions surged. She spent the evening before the gala sitting in Mary's living room, imagining the moment she would finally reclaim her power. Jason, meanwhile, rehearsed his own performance. He practiced smiling in the mirror and straightening his tie. He never considered she might arrive looking serene now. On the afternoon of the gala, Olivia picked Emily up in a black car, giving her a reassuring smile. As they approached the glittering entrance, Emily felt her heart thump, but her breath remained steady. And Jason had no idea that tonight's quiet confrontation would become the turning point that split his world in two. The ballroom shimmered beneath towering crystal chandeliers, every surface polished to a golden shine. This was the kind of event Jason had always thrived in: gala lights, champagne glasses, powerful donors in tailored tuxedos. A place where reputation was currency and confidence was armor. He arrived early, wearing a charcoal suit and his brightest smile, determined to look untouchable. He mingled easily, offering practiced laughs and firm handshakes. But behind the mask, his heart beat with a jittery rhythm. He needed tonight to go perfectly. If people saw him centered and calm, maybe the rumors would fade. Maybe the compliance inquiry would blow over. Maybe the image he'd spent years constructing would survive one more scandal. But even as he tried to charm donors, he felt the tension in the airside glances, hushed whispers from people who once praised him. Then, just as the lights dimmed for the opening speech, the ballroom doors opened. A subtle shift swept across the room, like a breeze cutting through still air. Jason, standing near the stage, turned instinctively, and his entire body went rigid. Emily stepped inside. She wore a soft, elegant gown that draped around her growing belly like a gentle embrace. Not extravagant, just timeless. Her hair was pinned loosely, her makeup natural, her posture calm. She didn't cling to walls or hide in shadows. She walked with quiet dignity, Olivia at her side, guiding her gently through the crowd. People turned, some recognizing her, some simply struck by the quiet confidence she carried. Jason's breath caught. He expected tears, trembling, accusations. He expected a scene he could spin later. But Emily was serene, beautiful in a way he hadn't seen in years. Strong in a way he never imagined she could be. And her very presence unsettled him more than any shouting match ever could. He started toward her, forcing a smile that felt brittle on his face. "Emily," he said softly, stepping into her path. I didn't think you'd be here." Emily looked at him with eyes that no longer held fear. "I'm attending the gala," she replied calmly. "That's all." "You didn't return my calls," he said, his voice tightening. "I didn't need to," she answered. Olivia stepped slightly forward, a silent warning in her posture. Jason ignored it. "Emily, we can't do this here," he whispered urgently. "Whatever this is, this performance, let's just go somewhere private. We can talk." "This isn't a performance," Emily said. "It's my life, and I'm choosing not to hide." Her words hit harder than anger. Jason felt heat rise under his collar. His smile slipped. For a moment, the mask cracked. "You're embarrassing me," he hissed. "No," she answered softly. "Your choices embarrassed you. I'm just existing." Several board members nearby turned, watching the tension unfold. Jason's stomach twisted. He forced another smile, trying to recover, but the damage was already spreading. Emily wasn't exposing him with shouting, she was exposing him by standing tall. As the crowd shifted toward the dining area, Emily moved away, guided by Olivia. Jason stood frozen, feeling something foreign gnawing at his insides. Panic. Loss of control. Later in the evening, while donors mingled near the silent auction tables, whispers began circulating, questions about Jason's marriage, about Emily's sudden absence from social events, about the compliance investigation someone had heard pieces of. Jason tried to regain command of the room, but his confidence faltered each time he saw someone glance at Emily with empathy. Then came the moment that shattered his last illusion of control. A senior partner approached Emily gently, offering her a supportive smile. He had heard whispers, not the full story, but enough to understand she wasn't here to cause trouble. He leaned in and said quietly, "If you ever need support during this time, the firm values integrity, and we always protect those wronged by misuse of power." When Jason saw that conversation, panic flashed across his face like lightning. His world, carefully crafted, obsessively maintained, was slipping from his grasp in real time. Emily felt the shift too. She felt something uncoil in her chest, a long-held tension finally releasing. She didn't need to speak. She didn't need to expose him. The truth was already working its way through the room, carried by his own actions. She placed a gentle hand on her belly and exhaled slowly. The baby kicked softly in response, as if sensing the strength settling into her bones. Jason, watching helplessly from across the ballroom, had no idea the real hit was still coming, and this time it would be public, undeniable, and devastating. The gala's music softened into a low hum as the program shifted toward private donor meetings in the adjoining suites. Jason moved stiffly through the crowd, his smile fading every time someone glanced his way with caution instead of admiration. He felt like a man standing on a cracked floor, one wrong step, and everything would collapse. He kept checking the hallway, making sure Emily wasn't speaking to anyone who could damage him further. But every time he spotted her, she was simply existing with quiet poise. That frightened him more than any confrontation could. As desserts were being served, a senior board member, Robert Langley, approached Jason with a calm but unreadable expression. "We need a word," he said quietly. "Now." Jason swallowed. "Of course." Robert led him down a corridor lined with framed art and soft sconces into a private meeting room used for confidential donor discussions. Inside, 2 other board members sat at a polished table, their eyes sober. Jason felt something cold spread through his chest. He expected a minor concern, a question about work performance, maybe a small inquiry tied to the compliance audit. Instead, Robert closed the door gently and placed a folder on the table. "We were contacted anonymously today," he said. "The compliance team forwarded this to us due to its seriousness." Jason's pulse quickened. He forced a confident laugh. I'm sure it's a misunderstanding. Someone trying to cause trouble. No, Robert said firmly. It appears to be documentation regarding misuse of company funds. Jason stiffened. That's absurd. I would never. Robert held up a page. This is a receipt from the plaza. Champagne. A suite. Categorized as a client meeting. Jason blinked hard, his mask cracking. There were discussions, late-night negotiations. With who? Another board member asked. These receipts name no client. And this signature, this one belongs to a woman who isn't registered with any of our partner firms. Jason's breath hitched. Sienna. He tried to find his voice, but Robert pressed on, sliding out another page. This one was worse. A screenshot. Jason recognized it instantly, his own message, telling Sienna to keep quiet about the company card. The board members watched his face fall. We don't tolerate this, Robert said. Not ethically, not legally, and certainly not with your position. Jason felt heat rising behind his eyes. He clenched his fists under the table. Someone is framing me. My wife, she's angry, irrational. She's trying to destroy me because she's emotional and... Enough, Robert said sharply. Your wife attended this event tonight with more dignity than I've ever seen in a situation like this. Don't insult her intelligence. Or ours. Jason felt the room tilt. He had lost his audience. We're placing you on immediate administrative leave, Robert continued, pending full investigation. And Jason, this looks bad. Very bad. The words shattered something inside him. His career, his identity was no longer in his control. He tried one last attempt. I can explain everything. Please. Just give me a chance. Robert stood. Explain it to compliance, not to us. The meeting ended abruptly. Jason stepped out into the hallway, his legs weak. The noise from the gala drifted faintly toward him, but it sounded distant, hollow. He loosened his tie, gasping for breath. Then he saw Emily. She was speaking quietly with Olivia, her posture relaxed, her hand resting gently on her belly. She looked peaceful, untouched by chaos, surrounded by support. The contrast struck Jason like a blow. His world was collapsing. Hers was being rebuilt. He took a step toward her, but Olivia noticed immediately. She shifted, positioning herself protectively. Emily simply looked at him calm, steady, untouchable. And in that moment, Jason felt something he had never experienced before. Powerless, completely and utterly powerless. But the night was not done. The next blow waiting for him would not come from Emily, but from someone he had counted on without hesitation. Emily left the gala that night feeling a kind of exhaustion that ran deeper than physical fatigue. But beneath that exhaustion, something else pulsed relief. For the first time since the truth broke open, she felt the weight shifting away from her shoulders. Truth was doing the work now. She didn't have to fight Jason anymore. His own actions were dismantling the image he once hid behind. The next morning, she woke early in Aunt Mary's brownstone, sunlight warming the quilt at her feet. She shuffled to the kitchen, one hand on her lower back, the baby rolling quietly inside her. Mary handed her a cup of warm tea and kissed her forehead. You're nearly there, honey. Every step from here is forward. Emily nodded, feeling her chest loosen. She was ready for forward. After breakfast, she opened her laptop and reviewed new inquiries from clients. Ever since she started sharing more of her design work online, something Olivia encouraged her to do, while distancing herself from Jason's finances, people had begun reaching out. One client in particular, the renovation project she had taken months ago, requested a meeting to discuss expanding the scope. It was the first time Emily felt hopeful about rebuilding her financial independence. When she arrived at the project site later that afternoon, the winter wind stung her cheeks, but inside the warm, half-renovated loft, she felt grounded. And there he was again, Daniel Hayes, the architect she'd been collaborating with. He wore the same relaxed sweater, blueprints rolled under one arm, his quiet presence steady, as always. You okay? Daniel asked softly the moment he saw her. He didn't hover, didn't pry, just observed with steady concern. Emily exhaled. Better today. A lot happened last night. He nodded. I figured, You looked different when you left the gala. You were there? She asked, surprised. Daniel shrugged lightly. I work with the firm that sponsors the event. I saw you walk in. He paused. You walked like someone who finally knew her worth. Emily felt warmth rise in her chest, gentle, unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. She shook her head shyly and motioned toward the plans. Let's go over the new layout. They spent the next hour reviewing lighting plans, cabinet placements, and the floor's structural corrections. Every time Emily offered an idea, Daniel listened, really listened. He respected her perspective, asked her opinion, and never once talked down to her. She hadn't realized how rare that felt, being seen, not controlled, being valued, not managed. When they finished, Emily reached for her notebook, but winced as a sharp pang ran across her side. Not panic, just the uncomfortable tightening her doctor had warned her about. Daniel noticed instantly. You need to sit, he said gently, guiding her to a nearby stool. You pushed yourself too much today. I'm fine, she whispered, embarrassed. You don't have to be fine every second, he replied, especially now. Emily blinked. The kindness in his voice was so different from the performative concern Jason used to show when it benefited him. Daniel's care wasn't dramatic. It was steady, simple, real. After a minute, she nodded. Thank you, really. Daniel offered to walk her outside, and together they stepped into the cool afternoon light. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the air. He didn't reach for her, didn't assume closeness, just walked beside her, matching her pace. Before she got into her rideshare, he paused. If you ever need anything, rides to appointments, someone to look over plans, just company, you can call me. Doesn't have to be complicated. She moved slowly through the apartment, her breath unsteady. Jason had forgotten his iPad on the kitchen counter. Normally she wouldn't have touched it. Normally she wouldn't even have considered the thought. But tonight, the perfumed blazer, the hotel receipt, the late-night lies, they all swirled through her mind, turning doubt into necessity. As the car pulled away, she watched him through the window. She didn't want to rush into anything. Her heart was still tender, her life still rebuilding. But she couldn't ignore what she felt, either. Daniel wasn't a lifeline. He wasn't a replacement. He was simply a good man, showing up in gentle ways at a time when Emily needed steadiness the most. Back at the brownstone, she updated Olivia about the project expansion and the loft meeting. Olivia smiled knowingly but didn't push, simply saying, You deserve good people around you. That night, as Emily folded tiny baby clothes near the window, she realized something quietly powerful. She was no longer defined by what Jason had done to her. Her life wasn't a shattered before and after. It was a beginning one she was building piece by piece, with her own hands. But while Emily rebuilt, Jason was preparing a move fueled not by love or regret but by desperation, a move that would cross yet another line. Jason's apartment felt smaller than ever, cold, restless, suffocating. He had barely slept since the gala. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emily standing there in that soft gown, looking calm while his world crumbled behind her. And worse, he saw the board members' faces when they handed him the compliance documents. He tried convincing himself this was temporary, that he could still salvage everything. But deep down, he knew the walls were closing in. He checked his phone again, no calls from Emily, not even a reply. He scrolled through his messages, rereading the ones he'd sent her in desperation. We need to talk. You don't understand how bad this is. Please, for the baby. Nothing. Silence. Jason hated silence. Silence meant he wasn't in control. He paced the apartment, his steps echoing across the hardwood floors. The baby crib they'd once built together leaned against the wall untouched, and for the first time, Jason felt a sharp sting of something that resembled guilt, then instantly smothered it with anger. Emily had humiliated him at the gala, even without saying a word. She had taken every ounce of leverage he had and placed it in the hands of lawyers. And he refused to let her dictate the end of their marriage. So he made a decision, a reckless one. He grabbed his coat and stormed out into the chilly Manhattan evening. He knew exactly where Emily was, Aunt Mary's brownstone, the safe little nest she'd run to. And tonight, he intended to confront her face to face, Lawyers be damned. Across the river, Emily was quietly settling into the guest room. She had just finished a video call with Olivia, reviewing the next steps in the case. Everything was progressing exactly as it should. The temporary support hearing was scheduled, the compliance investigation was expanding, and the reconstructed timeline left very little room for Jason to manipulate the narrative. Emily rubbed her belly, whispering softly to her baby as the wind rattled the window. She allowed herself to imagine a future where Jason wasn't a looming shadow, just a mistake she survived. She didn't know Jason was already stepping onto the brownstone's porch. He knocked sharp, loud, impatient. Emily stiffened. Aunt Mary hurried to the door with a frown, peeking through the small window. Her face hardened. "It's him." Emily's pulse quickened. "Don't open it." But Jason didn't wait. He knocked again, harder this time. "Emily, I know you're in there. We're talking tonight." Mary raised her voice from behind the door. "Go home, Jason. She doesn't want to see you." "This isn't up to you," he snapped. "She's my wife." Mary didn't budge. Not for long. Jason slammed a fist against the door. "Open it, or I swear I'll—" "Jason." Emily stepped into the hallway. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through his rage immediately. Mary hesitated, then stepped aside just enough for Emily to be seen, but not enough for Jason to enter. Jason's eyes were wild. "What are you doing? Why are you hiding from me?" "I'm not hiding," she said calmly. "I just don't want to talk to you. I lost my job because of you," he shouted. "They suspended me. Do you understand what that means?" Emily swallowed but kept steady. "You lost your job because you misused company funds." "Not because I told the truth." Jason's jaw tightened. "You think you can take my money, my child, my reputation?" Emily's voice trembled, but she did not back down. "I'm protecting our child from a man who put champagne and hotel rooms before his family." Jason took a step forward, but Mary blocked the doorway again. "That's enough. Get off my porch." He pointed at Emily, desperation bleeding into his voice. "You're making a mistake. You can't do this without me." Emily felt something inside her snap quietly, decisively. "I already am." For a moment, Jason said nothing. His breath turned shallow. His expression cracked not from sorrow, but from realizing she meant every word. He backed away slowly, his eyes darkening with a kind of quiet fury. "You'll regret this," he whispered. Then he turned and walked down the steps into the night. Emily closed the door with shaking hands, leaning against it as her breath finally escaped in tears she had held back too long. Mary pulled her into a hug, whispering, "You did the right thing, sweetheart." Emily nodded against her shoulder. "I know." What none of them knew was that, later that night, Jason would make one phone call, one that would drag another unexpected person into the storm. A person Emily trusted. Emily woke the next morning drained but steady. After last night's confrontation, she expected more chaos, more texts, more pounding at the door. But instead, silence. No calls, no messages. The quiet almost felt suspicious. Aunt Mary made pancakes, humming softly while Emily sat with her hands wrapped around a warm mug, the baby shifting rhythmically beneath her ribs. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to breathe. Then her phone buzzed. Not a call, an email. From Olivia. Subject: "We need to meet. Urgent." Emily's stomach tightened. Urgent from Olivia never meant anything small. She grabbed her coat and headed out into the crisp morning, Mary insisting on calling a car so Emily didn't walk in the cold. When she reached Olivia's office, she found her pacing with a stack of papers clutched in her hand. "You need to sit," Olivia said immediately. Emily lowered herself slowly into the chair. "What happened?" Olivia pressed her lips together. "Jason made a move last night. He contacted someone unexpected." Emily's heartbeat quickened. "Who?" "Your former landlord," Olivia said softly. "He tried to convince them you abandoned the apartment illegally. He's attempting to paint you as unstable and irresponsible to undermine your residency claim." Emily's hands shook. "What?" "I left because of him." "He knows that." "Yes," Olivia said, sitting across from her. But he's grasping at anything that makes you look unreliable. Emily felt panic rise, but Olivia continued quickly. The landlord didn't believe him. At all. In fact, he called me to report it because he was uncomfortable with Jason's tone. Emily blinked, stunned. So, Jason's attempt failed? Failed miserably, Olivia confirmed. And now we have proof that he tried to manipulate a third party to fabricate instability claims. Emily let out a shaky breath. That alone could damage Jason further in court. But Olivia wasn't done. There's something else, she said. The compliance department reached out this morning. They received an anonymous submission last night, documents tying Jason to misreported client expenses, including messages instructing someone to falsify details on a receipt. Emily felt her breath catch. Anonymous? Olivia nodded. Someone wants to protect themselves and help the truth come out. Sienna, Emily whispered. It wasn't a guess. It was a recognition. Olivia's silence confirmed it. Emily leaned back, pressing a hand to her belly. Everything was accelerating now. The truth wasn't creeping out, it was erupting. All the lies Jason had built his life on were collapsing faster than he could hide them. Olivia reached across the table. There's more. The compliance team already forwarded everything to the board. Jason's administrative leave will turn into a suspension by the end of the day. And Emily. She paused. His position is no longer secure, at all. Emily closed her eyes. She didn't celebrate, but she felt the tremor of long-delayed justice settling into place. But Jason didn't wait. He knocked again, harder this time. Emily, I know you're in there. We're talking tonight. Her phone buzzed again, a number she didn't recognize. A voicemail. She pressed play. Jason's voice came through, cracked and frantic. Emily, they suspended me. I'm done. You did this. You ruined everything. She flinched, but didn't cry. She listened as he rambled, blaming her, blaming manipulative lawyers, blaming the world. Not once did he mention remorse. Not once did he mention the baby. The message ended abruptly. Emily stood still, the winter wind slipping beneath her coat. For the first time, she felt something shift. Not anger, not heartbreak. Release, she whispered to her stomach. We're almost free. Then her phone buzzed again, this time a message from a number saved in her contacts. Daniel, I'm near the park dropping off plans. Do you need company? Just say the word. Emily stared at the screen, feeling warmth settle over her chest. Someone cared. Someone showed up without expecting anything in return. And while Jason unraveled alone, Emily's life was quietly opening a door to something new, something steady, kind, and honest. The morning the final court hearing arrived, Emily woke before dawn. The sky was painted in soft gray, and the brownstone felt impossibly still. She sat on the edge of the bed, one hand resting over her full, round belly, the other smoothing the blanket as she inhaled deeply. Today wasn't about fear. It wasn't about Jason. It was about closure, real, permanent closure. Aunt Mary insisted on making breakfast, fussing over her as if she were fragile porcelain. You're almost done, sweetheart, she whispered. Today, you walk out lighter. At Olivia's office, Emily reviewed the final documents for the hearing. The evidence was airtight receipts, falsified expenses, messages, testimonies, and the failed attempt Jason made to manipulate their landlord. Everything pointed to a pattern of dishonesty, not a single mistake. Emily no longer trembled when she saw Jason's name on paperwork. Instead, she felt something like quiet strength settle deep inside her ribcage. When they arrived at the courthouse, the halls smelled faintly of old paper and polished floors. Emily walked carefully, her steps slow but firm. Olivia walked beside her, radiating steady confidence, ready to shield her from whatever storm might appear. Jason was already in the hallway when Emily turned the corner. He looked nothing like the polished man she had married. His suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, his eyes darting desperate, almost panicked. He opened his mouth when he saw her, but Olivia stepped forward immediately. No, she said firmly, you don't speak to her. But for a brief moment, Emily met his eyes. There was no love there, no longing, no grief, only resentment that he had lost control of her, of his job, of his perfect image. And with that realization, all ties dissolved. The hearing itself was swift. The judge reviewed the evidence, asked a few clarifying questions, then looked at Jason with a stern, unblinking expression. "Mr. Carter," he said, "your actions demonstrate a consistent disregard for honesty, marital obligation, and financial responsibility. Given the evidence, temporary full custody will be awarded to Mrs. Carter, with supervised visitation following birth, pending continued review." Jason's face drained of color. Emily felt tears gather in her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief so overwhelming it made her chest ache. The judge continued, "Financial support is granted in full. Mrs. Carter will retain residence rights and full decision-making authority regarding the child." It was done. The gavel struck like thunder, a sound that marked the end of one life and the beginning of another. Jason stormed out of the room, muttering, hands shaking with fury. Emily didn't watch him go. She didn't need to. Outside the courthouse, the winter sun broke through the clouds as if waiting for this exact moment. Emily inhaled deeply, her breath visible in the cool air. She felt lighter, still tired, still healing but undeniably free. Olivia squeezed her hand. "You did it." Emily nodded. "We did it." A car pulled up. The window lowered. "Daniel." He stepped out, his eyes soft the moment they landed on her. "I didn't want you leaving today alone," he said. "If that's okay." Emily felt warmth spread across her chest. She smiled, small, tender, but real. "It's more than okay." Daniel walked to her slowly, respecting her space, then offered his arm. She took it, letting him steady her as they walked toward the car. She wasn't stepping into a fairy tale. She wasn't rushing toward a new romance. She was stepping into a life where she could choose peace, where kindness wasn't currency, where love wasn't performance. As they drove away, Emily looked out the window at the city skyline, bright, complicated, full of possibility. The baby kicked gently, as if sensing freedom, too. She placed her hand over her belly and whispered, "We're safe now." And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. Jason had lost everything he tried to control. Emily had gained everything she thought she'd never have again: safety, dignity, and the promise of a love built on truth. So our story closes here. And if you, my wonderful friend, are still with me at this moment, it means something in this journey touched your heart in a quiet, honest way. Maybe it reminded you of your own strength. Maybe it reminded you that dignity matters, even when love breaks. Emily's path teaches us a simple truth echoed by the Stoics: what stands in the way becomes the way. The pain she faced didn't end her. It shaped her into someone wiser, calmer, and more grounded. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And that's exactly what Emily did. She stopped chasing what hurt her and chose what healed her. So now, take a breath with me. Think about your own life. What truth have you been avoiding? What peace have you been postponing? Healing doesn't shout, it whispers. And if you're feeling that whisper right now, maybe it's your turn to choose yourself, just like she did. If this story moved you, made you think, or helped you feel a little less alone tonight, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue creating stories that speak to the heart. You're not alone, and we'll walk the next story together.
Unaware, the wife he divorced to marry her best friend had just won the $300 million contract. He told her she wasn't good enough for his family. What she did shocked him. The champagne flute trembled in Marcus Whitmore's hand as he watched his ex-wife step out of the black Mercedes S-Class that had just pulled up to his wedding venue. 6 months ago, he'd told Natalie she'd never amount to anything, that she was an embarrassment to the Whitmore name. 2 hours ago, he'd married her former best friend, convinced he'd traded up. But the woman walking toward him now, in a custom Valentino suit that cost more than his car, wasn't the broken, desperate woman he divorced. The security detail flanking her wasn't for show. Neither was the CEO of Titanium Industries, following 3 steps behind. Marcus's new bride, Sienna, went pale beside him. "That's impossible," she whispered. "She wasn't supposed to be—" But Natalie was already smiling, and it was the kind of smile that burned empires to the ground. In her hand was a leather portfolio stamped with words that made Marcus's blood run cold. $300 million, Whitmore Tech acquisition. 6 months earlier, Natalie Chen had believed in fairy tales. She believed that 10 years of marriage meant something, that the late nights she'd spent building Whitmore Technologies from a garage startup into a mid-sized firm mattered, that her husband's promises, "You're my partner, we're in this together, I couldn't do this without you," were more than just convenient lies. She'd been wrong about all of it. "You're not good enough for this family, Natalie." Marcus's mother, Patricia Whitmore, delivered the words with surgical precision in the formal living room of the Whitmore estate. Marcus stood beside her, silent, his jaw tight but his eyes empty of the warmth Natalie had once loved. "Excuse me?" Natalie's voice came out smaller than she intended. Patricia's diamond earrings caught the light as she tilted her head, examining Natalie like a specimen under glass. "You come from nothing. You have no pedigree, no connections, no refinement. Marcus deserves someone who can elevate him socially, someone who understands our world." "I helped build the company," Natalie said, her hands shaking. "I mortgaged my father's house when the banks wouldn't give us a loan. I worked 18-hour days." "As a glorified secretary," Patricia interrupted, "playing at business while Marcus did the real work. Now that Whitmore Technologies is worth something, we need someone appropriate by his side, someone like Sienna." Natalie's heart stopped. Sienna, my Sienna, her best friend since college, her maid of honor, the woman who'd cried on Natalie's shoulder through 2 bad breakups and countless career disappointments, the woman who'd been spending an awful lot of time at company strategy sessions with Marcus lately. Marcus finally spoke, his voice flat. "Sienna understands the lifestyle. She comes from the right background. Her father's connections will open doors we need." "We?" Natalie's laugh was bitter. "There is no we anymore, is there?" "The divorce papers are already drawn up," Patricia said, sliding a manila envelope across the mahogany table. "You'll receive $200,000 and nothing more. No stake in the company, no alimony. You weren't a founder, merely an employee. The prenuptial agreement is very clear." Natalie's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. The prenup she'd signed at 22, stupidly in love and trusting, gave her nothing. Every asset, every patent, every piece of intellectual property was in Marcus's name alone. "Sign it," Marcus said quietly. "Make this easy on yourself." "Does Sienna know?" Natalie's voice cracked. "Does she know you've been planning this?" Marcus's silence was answer enough. Natalie looked at the man she'd loved for 15 years, including their 5 years of dating. She saw a stranger. No, she saw clearly for the first time. The ambition that had seemed admirable was actually ruthless. The confidence she'd found attractive was arrogance. And the family she'd tried so hard to please had never seen her as anything more than a temporary inconvenience. She signed the papers with shaking hands. "One more thing," Patricia said as Natalie stood to leave. "The wedding is in 6 months. We expect you to be gracious about this. No drama, no social media posts, no attempts to damage Marcus's reputation. The Whitmores have lawyers who will bury you if you try." Natalie walked out of that house with nothing but her car, her clothes, and a bank account that held exactly $200,000. She also walked out with something the Whitmores had overlooked: a decade of industry knowledge, relationships she'd built while Marcus took credit, and the contact information of every major client she'd personally courted. Most importantly, she walked out with rage. The first month was survival. Natalie rented a small apartment in a neighborhood Marcus would never be caught dead in. She cried herself to sleep most nights. She blocked Sienna's number after the 15th attempt to explain. She avoided social media, where photos of Marcus and Sienna at various society events multiplied like a virus. The second month was clarity. Natalie had a degree in computer engineering that she'd never fully utilized at Whitmore Tech, where Marcus had relegated her to client relations and administrative support. She had relationships with mid-level executives at every major tech company on the West Coast. And she had something Marcus didn't. She actually understood what their clients needed. Whitmore Technologies specialized in supply chain optimization software. But they'd always been a service provider, never an innovator. Natalie had spent 10 years listening to clients complain about the same problems over and over. She'd even drafted solutions, which Marcus had dismissed as above your pay grade, honey. She stopped being honey and became a hunter. By month 3, she'd incorporated Novatech Solutions. She'd cashed in favors from former clients who remembered her, not Marcus. She'd hired 2 brilliant engineers who'd left Whitmore Tech because Marcus was impossible to work with. She'd worked 20-hour days coding, pitching, and building. By month 4, she'd secured her first contract, a $2 million deal with a regional manufacturing company. By month 5, she'd caught the attention of Titanium Industries, the largest logistics conglomerate in North America. They were looking for someone to completely overhaul their supply chain systems. The contract was worth $300 million over 5 years. It was the biggest deal in the industry's history. Natalie's 5th-month revenue was enough to hire a team of 15. Marcus still had no idea she existed as a competitor. He was too busy planning his wedding to the woman who'd betrayed Natalie in the cruelest way possible. The final pitch to Titanium Industries was scheduled for the morning of Marcus's wedding. Natalie chose her timing carefully. "This is Novatech Solutions' proprietary AI-driven optimization platform," Natalie said, standing before the board of directors of Titanium Industries. "It doesn't just track your supply chain, it predicts disruptions before they happen, automatically reroutes shipments, and reduces waste by an estimated 43%. James Keller, Titanium's CEO, leaned forward. He was 60, sharp-eyed, and famously difficult to impress. "We've seen a dozen pitches, Ms. Chen. Whitmore Technologies assured us they could deliver something similar." "Whitmore Technologies is built on legacy systems and reactive solutions," Natalie said calmly. "They're excellent at maintaining the status quo. But you didn't become the largest logistics company in North America by maintaining the status quo, Mr. Keller. You worked for Whitmore Tech," another board member noted, "for 10 years. "I built most of their client relationships during that time," Natalie corrected. "I also identified every weakness in their system. Their platform requires extensive manual input. It's expensive to customize, and it fails the moment something unpredictable happens, which in logistics is constantly." She clicked to the next slide. "Our platform learns, it adapts, and it's already being used successfully by Carson Manufacturing, whose shipping efficiency increased by 37% 60 days. "We did our homework on you, Ms. Chen," Keller said. "You launched your company 5 months ago with $200,000 and a lot of anger at your ex-husband." Natalie smiled. "I launched my company 5 months ago with 10 years of suppressed innovation and the knowledge that Marcus Whitmore succeeds by taking credit for other people's work. Mine specifically. That's quite an accusation. It's a fact. I can document every client I brought to Whitmore Tech, every solution I proposed that he rebranded as his own, and every reason he kept me in an administrative role instead of utilizing my engineering degree." She paused. "But I'm not here to settle scores, Mr. Keller. I'm here because you need the best, and I'm offering it to you." The room was silent for a long moment. Then Keller smiled. "Show me the technical specifications." 2 hours later, Natalie walked out of Titanium Industries with a signed letter of intent. The final contract would be executed within a week, but the deal was done. $300 million. She sat in her car for 5 minutes, hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. Then she called her assistant. "Kristen, I need you to arrange something for me. I'm going to a wedding this afternoon." The Whitmore wedding was exactly what Natalie expected. Ostentatious, expensive, and soulless. The venue was a historic mansion overlooking the ocean. White roses everywhere. A string quartet playing something classical and pretentious. 200 guests dressed in designer clothes, sipping champagne that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Natalie arrived in the Mercedes S-Class she'd purchased that morning. The security detail, 2 professionals she'd hired both for protection and effect, flanked her. She wore a custom Valentino suit in midnight blue, her hair styled in a sleek updo that had cost $800. Diamond earrings that were real, not the cubic zirconia she'd worn for 10 years while Marcus spent money on his car collection. She looked like money because she now had it. James Keller had insisted on attending the wedding with her. "I want to see Marcus Whitmore's face," he'd said with dark amusement. "Call it a personal indulgence." They walked through the garden where the reception was in full swing. Natalie spotted Patricia Whitmore first, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition to something like horror. Then Marcus turned around. His face went through the same journey, but faster. He'd been laughing at something, his arm around Sienna, who looked beautiful in a wedding dress that probably cost $50,000. Sienna's smile froze when she saw Natalie. "Natalie?" Marcus's voice cracked. "What are you doing here?" "Congratulations on your wedding," Natalie said pleasantly. She held up the leather portfolio. "I wanted to personally deliver this." "What is that?" Patricia demanded, moving closer. "That depends on perspective," Natalie said. "For me, it's vindication. For you, it's a catastrophe." She handed the portfolio to Marcus, who opened it with shaking hands. The color drained from his face as he read the first page. This can't be the $300 million contract with Titanium Industries," Natalie confirmed. "Signed this morning. By me, on behalf of Novatech Solutions, the company I founded after you threw me away." "That's impossible," Patricia said flatly. "You're nobody. You have no credentials." "I have a master's degree in computer engineering from Stanford," Natalie interrupted. "I have 10 years of industry experience. I have relationships with every major player in supply chain logistics. And most importantly, I have talent, which your son has been taking credit for since we met." Marcus was still staring at the contract. "Titanium Industries was supposed to sign with us. They told us we were the front runner." "They lied," James Keller said, speaking for the first time. He stepped forward, extending his hand to Marcus with a cold smile. "James Keller, CEO of Titanium Industries. We told you what you wanted to hear while we evaluated all options. Ms. Chen's proposal was superior in every metric. It wasn't even close." Sienna's hand flew to her mouth. She looked between Natalie and Marcus, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You came from nothing," Patricia said, her voice shaking. "You were nothing when Marcus married you." "I was never nothing," Natalie said quietly. "I was just married to a man who needed me to be nothing so he could feel like something. And I was friends with a woman who was willing to betray me for a taste of a lifestyle she didn't earn." She turned to Sienna, whose eyes were filling with tears. "Did he tell you how it happened? How we built the company in our garage? How I went without meals so we could afford server costs? How I called in every favor, contacted every potential client, wrote every proposal while he played golf with investors?" "Natalie," Sienna started. "No," Natalie cut her off. "You don't get to say my name anymore. You knew what you were doing. You made your choice." She looked back at Marcus. "But this isn't about revenge. This is about consequences. You told me I wasn't good enough for your family. You threw me away the moment you thought you didn't need me anymore. But you were wrong about two things, Marcus." "What?" he whispered. "First, you never didn't need me. Every success you had was built on my work, my relationships, my ideas. Without me, you're just an ambitious man with a mediocre product and an overinflated ego." "And second?" Patricia demanded. Natalie smiled. "Second, I was never trying to be good enough for your family. I should have realized years ago that your family wasn't good enough for me." She turned to James Keller. "I think we're done here." As they walked away, Natalie heard the explosion behind her, Patricia's voice shrill with panic. "Marcus, do you realize what this means? Titanium Industries was going to be 40% of our revenue. We'll have to lay off staff, cancel the expansion." "We're ruined," Marcus said, his voice hollow. "She took everything." Natalie didn't look back. She didn't need to. The validation wasn't in their shock or their ruin, though she'd be lying if she said it didn't feel good. The real validation was knowing she'd done it herself. She'd taken nothing and built something extraordinary. She'd proven that her worth was never dependent on Marcus's approval or Patricia's acceptance. She'd proven it to the only person who mattered, herself. 3 months later, Natalie stood in the executive office of Novatech Solutions, looking out over the city. The company had moved into a downtown high-rise. Her team had grown to 45 employees. 3 more major contracts were in negotiation. Her assistant knocked on the door. Ms. Chen, you have a visitor who doesn't have an appointment. A Sienna Whitmore. Natalie's jaw tightened. Tell her. She says it will only take 5 minutes. She looks like she's been crying. Against her better judgment, Natalie nodded. Sienna looked different, thinner, tired. The designer clothes couldn't hide the stress that had carved new lines around her eyes. Thank you for seeing me, Sienna said quietly. You have 5 minutes. Sienna nodded, clutching her purse like a lifeline. I'm leaving Marcus. The divorce will be final next month. Natalie felt nothing. I'm not interested in your marriage problems. I know, I needed you to know that you were right. About everything. Sienna's voice cracked. He's exactly who you said he was. The moment things got difficult financially, he blamed me. Said I wasn't bringing enough value to the marriage. Patricia never stopped comparing me to you, ironically. Saying at least you'd been useful, at least you'd known your place. Why are you telling me this? Because I owe you an apology that can never be enough, Sienna said, tears streaming down her face. I destroyed our friendship for a fantasy. I thought I wanted what you had. But what you had was a decade of being undervalued by a narcissist. I just didn't see it until I was living it. You saw it, Natalie corrected. You saw me struggling. You saw me crying. You saw Marcus dismiss me and belittle me. You saw all of it, and you decided you wanted him anyway because you thought the money and the status were worth it. Sienna flinched but didn't deny it. I didn't come here for forgiveness, she said. I know I'll never have that. I just came to tell you that watching you walk into that wedding, successful and powerful and free, it was the first time I realized what I'd really done. I didn't just betray my best friend. I traded a real relationship for a transaction, and I lost everything that mattered. Natalie studied the woman who'd once been closer than a sister. She felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no pity, just emptiness where the friendship had been. Your 5 minutes are up, she said. Sienna nodded, wiping her eyes. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, I always knew you were brilliant. I was just too insecure to admit it. Marcus didn't diminish you, Natalie. You were always this person. You just finally let yourself believe it. After Sienna left, Natalie returned to the window. The city spread before her, full of possibility. Her phone buzzed. A text from James Keller. Board meeting next week. 3 new contracts to discuss. You're going to need a bigger office. Natalie smiled. She thought about Marcus, probably scrambling to save his company, finally understanding what he'd lost. She thought about Patricia, whose social circle had undoubtedly heard about the spectacular failure at the wedding. She thought about Sienna, learning too late that status without substance is just an expensive cage. But mostly she thought about the 22-year-old girl who'd signed a prenup because she'd believed love was enough. The woman who'd worked herself to exhaustion for a man who'd never seen her value. The wife who'd been told she wasn't good enough for a family that had never deserved her in the first place. That woman was gone. In her place was someone who'd learned the hardest lesson of all. The only approval that matters is your own. Natalie picked up her phone and called her team. Conference room in 10 minutes. We have work to do. She didn't waste time on revenge. She was too busy building an empire, and that, it turned out, was the best revenge of all. Epilogue, 6 months later. The tech industry newsletter headline read, Novatech Solutions acquires Whitmore Technologies for $12 million. Former wife now, former husband's boss. Marcus signed the acquisition papers in the same conference room where his mother had once told Natalie she wasn't good enough. Natalie sat across from him, flanked by her lawyers and her CFO. She wore a power suit and an expression of professional courtesy that revealed nothing. The terms are clear, her lawyer said. Whitmore Technologies becomes a subsidiary of Novatech Solutions. Marcus Whitmore stays on as a senior consultant for 2 years, reporting directly to Miss Chen. Marcus's hands shook as he signed. One question, he said quietly when the lawyers left the room. Why buy the company at all? You could have let us fail. Natalie considered him. The man who'd once been her whole world now seemed small, diminished. Because 65 people work for Whitmore Tech, she said. Good people who don't deserve to lose their jobs because you made bad decisions. I'm buying the company for them, not for you. And me? His voice was barely a whisper. What happens to me? You work for me now, Natalie said simply. You'll do what you do best. Be the face of the company at events. Play golf with clients, look good in a suit. The difference is, now everyone will know that's all you ever were. The real work will happen around you, like it always did. She stood, gathering her papers. Oh, and Marcus? One more thing. He looked up, something like hope flickering in his eyes. You were wrong about me not being good enough for your family, Natalie said, but you were right about one thing. I wasn't good enough. I was better. I was always better. I just had to stop letting you convince me otherwise. She walked out of the room, her heels clicking on the marble floor, leaving Marcus Whitmore sitting alone in the empire he'd lost and she'd built. Outside, her assistant was waiting with her schedule. You have a podcast interview in an hour. Women who built tech empires. Then dinner with the Titanium Industries Board. Then I go home, Natalie said, smiling. Tomorrow I'm taking the day off. First one in 6 months. Any plans? Natalie thought about the life she'd built. The company that bore her name. The team that respected her. The success she'd earned not by being someone's wife or someone's friend, but by being undeniably, unapologetically excellent. I'm going to sleep in, she said, and when I wake up, I'm going to remember that I did all of this by myself, and that's worth more than any contract. She meant it, because somewhere between the divorce papers and the $300 million deal, between being told she wasn't good enough and becoming the best in her field, Natalie Chen had learned the truth. She'd never needed Marcus Whitmore to be successful. He'd needed her, and now everyone knew it. The photographer adjusted the lighting one more time. Ms. Chen, can you turn slightly to the left? Perfect, hold that. Natalie smiled naturally, comfortable in front of cameras now in a way she never had been as Marcus's wife. Back then, she'd always positioned herself slightly behind him in photos, making herself smaller. Now she took up space unapologetically. That's the cover shot, the photographer announced. Forbes' top 50 self-made women in tech. You're number 7 this year. After the photographer left, Natalie's executive assistant, Kristen, who'd been with her since month 3 and was now her chief of staff, brought in her tablet. Your afternoon schedule, but first you need to see this. She pulled up a news article. Whitmore Technologies subsidiary posts record profits under new leadership. Marcus Whitmore steps down. Natalie scanned the article. After 2 years of reporting to her, Marcus had finally resigned. The company was thriving under new management, specifically under Derek Torres, one of the engineers who'd left Whitmore Tech to join Natalie in the early days and had proven himself brilliant. He released a statement, Kristen said, scrolling down. Want to hear it? Sure, Kristen read. After careful consideration, I've decided to pursue other opportunities. I'm grateful for my time at Whitmore Technologies and proud of the company's continued success under Novatech Solutions leadership. Translation, his ego couldn't handle being my employee, Natalie said without malice. 3 years had drained the anger from her. Marcus was just a man now, not a villain or a wound. Just someone who'd once been important and no longer was. There's more, Kristen said. Patricia Whitmore sold the estate. Downsizing. Apparently the social circle got too uncomfortable after you bought the company. Natalie nodded. She felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just indifference. That was how she knew she'd truly moved on. Their downfall didn't matter to her anymore. And Sienna? Remarried. To a high school teacher, actually. They're living in Portland. She posted something on social media last week, a long caption about learning what actually matters in life. Kristen hesitated. She mentioned you, didn't name you, but it was obvious. Said her biggest regret was betraying someone who deserved better, and that watching you succeed was the most powerful lesson in integrity she'd ever received. Natalie was quiet for a moment. I hope she means it. I hope she's actually happy. Really? Kristen sounded surprised. Really? Hating her was exhausting. Now I just don't think about her. Natalie smiled slightly. That's actual freedom, not needing them to fail for me to feel successful. A knock on the door interrupted them. James Keller walked in, grinning. At 63, he'd become something of a mentor to Natalie, And Novatech's partnership with Titanium Industries had expanded into ventures neither of them had imagined 3 years ago. "I have news," he announced. "The board just approved it. Titanium Industries wants to acquire 15% equity in Novatech Solutions for $800 million. Natalie's eyes widened. "That would value the company at $5.3 billion, James finished. "Congratulations, Natalie. You're officially a billionaire." Kristen let out a small shriek of excitement. Natalie sat down slowly, processing. 5 years ago, she'd signed divorce papers that gave her $200,000 and nothing else. She'd been told she wasn't good enough, that she'd never amount to anything, that she was an embarrassment. Now she was worth more than Marcus had ever dreamed of being. "There's one condition," James said, his expression turning serious. "The board wants you to speak at our annual shareholders meeting. They want to hear the story, from garage startup wife to tech billionaire, directly from you." "The whole story?" Natalie asked quietly. "The whole story. The divorce, the betrayal, building Novatech from nothing. They think it's the most compelling case study in modern entrepreneurship they've ever seen. And they're right." Natalie thought about it. For 3 years, she'd kept mostly quiet about the personal details, letting her success speak for itself. But maybe there was value in telling the truth. Not for revenge, but for every woman who'd been told she wasn't enough. Every person who'd had their contributions stolen. Every dreamer who'd been broken and had to rebuild. "I'll do it," she said. The Titanium Industries shareholder meeting was held at a convention center in San Francisco. 3,000 people in attendance, another 50,000 streaming online. Natalie stood backstage, breathing deeply. She wore a slate gray suit, her hair pulled back, minimal jewelry. She looked like exactly what she was, serious, successful, and done apologizing for taking up space. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Watching the live stream. You deserve everything you've built. I'm sorry I ever made you doubt it. Marcus." Natalie stared at the message for a long moment. Then she deleted it without responding. Some apologies came too late to matter. Another text, this one from her mother. "So proud of you, sweetheart. Dad would be too." She smiled. Her father had passed 2 years ago, but he'd lived long enough to see her success. Long enough to have his mortgage paid off 10 times over. Long enough to tell her he'd always known she was destined for greatness. "Ms. Chen, you're on in 2 minutes." Natalie walked to the stage entrance. She could hear James's introduction. A woman who turned betrayal into billions, who proved that true worth can never be diminished by someone else's opinion. She stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause. "Thank you," she said when the room quieted. "I'm going to tell you a story about failure. Not my failure, though I've had plenty of those. But the failure of people who looked at me and saw only what I could do for them, never who I actually was." For the next 45 minutes, she told the truth. The garage startup, the stolen credit, the prenup, the divorce. The moment Patricia Whitmore had looked at her and said she wasn't good enough. "I believed them for a long time," Natalie said. 10 years, I made myself smaller so Marcus could feel bigger. I silenced my own ideas so he could appear brilliant. I worked in the shadows and let him stand in the light. And when he threw me away, part of me believed he was right, that I really wasn't enough." She paused, looking out at the audience. "But here's what I learned. When someone tells you you're not good enough, they're usually telling you that you're threatening them. You're too smart, too capable, too close to figuring out that you don't need them at all. They diminish you because your full power scares them." The room was silent, everyone leaning forward. "I built Novatech Solutions with $200,000, fury, and the knowledge that I'd spent 10 years being brilliant for someone else. It took losing everything to realize I'd never actually had anything. Not really, because anything you build in service of someone else's ego isn't yours. You're just the architect of their dream." She smiled. "But when you build for yourself, when you bet on your own vision and work for your own validation, that's when you discover what you're actually capable of. And it turns out I was capable of a lot more than Marcus Whitmore's wife." The applause started then, building like a wave. "So to everyone watching who's been told they're not enough, by a spouse, a boss, a family member, society, I want you to know something." Natalie's voice rang clear and strong. They're wrong, and one day you'll prove it. Maybe not with a billion-dollar company, maybe with a small business that makes you happy, maybe with art or writing or teaching or raising children who know their worth. Success looks different for everyone. But the moment you stop measuring yourself by someone else's broken ruler and start measuring yourself by your own standards, that's when you become unstoppable. That's when you become free. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Later that evening, Natalie sat alone in her penthouse apartment, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. She'd bought it a year ago and had decorated it exactly how she wanted. Bold artwork, comfortable furniture, a reading nook that got perfect morning light. No one had ever told her it was too much or not appropriate or didn't fit the image. It was entirely, perfectly hers. Her phone rang, an unfamiliar number with a New York area code. She almost didn't answer, then curiosity got the better of her. Ms. Chen, this is Rebecca Zhou from the Department of Computer Science at Stanford. I'm calling because we'd like to offer you an endowed professorship. We want to create a program called the Chen Fellowship, full scholarships for women in tech who show exceptional promise but lack financial resources. Natalie's breath caught. Yes, absolutely yes. After the call ended, she walked to the window. The city sparkled below her, full of people with their own stories of betrayal and resilience, failure and triumph. She thought about the 22-year-old who'd signed away her rights because she'd believed love was enough. She'd been so naive, so trusting, so willing to believe that making herself small was the same as being loved. That girl was gone, but Natalie didn't mourn her. She'd needed to be broken to be rebuilt. She'd needed to lose everything to discover what she was made of. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from a number she did recognize. Dr. Adrian Chen, her older brother. Saw your speech, called Mom after. We both cried. You're not just successful, little sister. You're remarkable. You always were. Natalie smiled, tears in her eyes. Because that was the thing Marcus and Patricia and even Sienna had never understood. She'd always been remarkable. The divorce hadn't made her successful. The betrayal hadn't made her brilliant. The $300 million contract hadn't made her worthy. She'd been all of those things all along. She'd just finally stopped letting other people convince her otherwise. And now, standing in her own apartment, running her own company, living her own life on her own terms, Natalie Chen understood the truest measure of success. It wasn't the money or the magazine covers or even the vindication of watching Marcus fail. It was waking up every morning and recognizing herself in the mirror. It was the quiet confidence of knowing her worth wasn't dependent on anyone's approval. It was the bone-deep certainty that she'd never again let someone make her feel small. That was freedom. That was power. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.